Welcome to Plenary Session 2, Technology, Schools, and Mayoral Offices, Innovation in Gun Violence Prevention and Reduction. Please welcome the moderator for today's session, Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore, Maryland.
Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here with you all, and so great to always be with AAMA and all our black mayors and our partners. We're going to be having a conversation. Am I good to go yet, sir? Mayor Tanner said I'm good to go, so we're good to go. We're going to have a great panel here today talking about, of course, one of our most pressing issues around our country, gun violence. So I'm going to bring up our panelists that are here. We're going to bring up my good friend and brother, Anthony Smith from Cities United. Anthony, let's give him a round of applause. And we're bringing out also Dr. Gerard Tate, Community Impact and Engagement Director. Dr. Tate. So, gentlemen, thank you, and we'll allow everybody else. Mayor Turner's about to draft some folks. It's NFL draft day. Who's the first pick?
Oh, there they go.
Mayor Lightfoot, I think Mayor Turner's looking for you. Oh, no. Oh, they're here. Oh, no, we're good, Mayor Turner. So we also have Paul John, Community Engagement Director. We have Ian Leslie from Axon. Is Ian here? Nope.
He's right here.
Ian there? Yeah. Ian, how are you, brother? We have Shannon Moore, Community Impact Coordinator from Axon, is also with us. Marlon Walton, School Counselor at River Gardens High School in St. Louis County, Missouri. And John Bush, Executive Director of the Savannah GA Office of Violence Prevention. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to get right into this. I, of course, am Mayor Scott, the 52nd mayor of Baltimore, and gun violence is actually what pushed me into public service growing up in one of our most challenging neighborhoods, where my neighborhood, as Anthony known, is Park Heights. It's where we have this horse race on the third Saturday of every May. Please come out and enjoy the festivities. But imagine growing up in a neighborhood where your neighborhood is literally the center of the sports world for one day, and 364 days of the year you're not even seen as human. That's what pushed me into public service. And we're going to jump right into this discussion so we can have a definitely robust one. And Anthony, I'm going to come to you first. Why is it important for our mayors in attendance today and really across the country to focus on active engagement of our young people, our most precious resource in efforts to reduce gun violence?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor Scott, and thank you for your leadership. And I come from Louisville, Kentucky, and we do the first Saturday in May horse race, the quickest 2 minutes in sports. So same dynamics. If we truly want to solve this issue, we've got to make sure that those who are most impacted by this issue is at the table, and that's our young people and their families. So you got to have them at the table, right? We've got to have them at the table as we make decisions about what their future looks like and how we're going to make sure that our cities support them and their families as they grow. Because I don't think we've done a good job at helping them identify what their visions are and what their dreams are, and then create a city that helps them live into that, right? So I think we've traditionally sit in rooms and make decisions that don't really involve them, but it's all about them, right? So for us at Cities United, we're real clear that mayors should have a youth council, should have a youth advisory team, should have young people not only advising them, but having to lead the work, right? So we're asking mayors to hire these young people as policy experts, put them in the room and take their insight and pay them for their insight as you develop your strategies and move your work, because this is the key. And then we need them to be the next you, Mayor Scott, to be honest, right? We need them to understand that City Hall is for them, because a lot of times young people just don't get to go into City Hall the way that other young people do, right? Especially young black kids just don't understand that City Hall is theirs and they should be a part of it. When I started working for city government, it was by accident that I got pulled into city government. It wasn't anybody said, hey, come in, there's a strategy for you to get here. It was by accident that I got there. So I just think having them at the table early, often, and always is the way that we build the future. So I think it's just key.
Anthony, that's a great answer. And just a follow-up, really, building on that for you and Dr. Tate. Really, what unique roles and strategies can, in this moment where we're really handling public safety in a way that we never have before, right? Where we're reimagining public safety as we deal with both the day-to-day and preventing future gun violence. What roles and strategies and unique things can officers of violence prevention, and I'll start with you, Dr. Tate, what role does that play for our mayors in our cities and around the country right now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for having me here. I think I will start answering that question by asking the question, are we asking the right questions of those officers? And do they have the right data and intelligence they need to do their work in a data-informed way? So I work at ShotSpotter. We detect gunshots. But my doctorate degree is in social work. I was a prior high school social worker. I was a prior cop. So I look at that as we detect injuries and trauma. And if you start looking at it like that, then the police should never be the only people at the table when you're talking about bringing in technology. Do your officers of violence prevention and intervention have access to data about where gunshots are happening in real time? Do they have access to our heat maps, our hot blocks? Do your schools have access to that data so that they can get kids next day trauma services? The research and evidence is really clear that those children that continue to be exposed to gun violence are most likely to carry it, be shot, and be your future shooters. So if you want to be proactive, if the police are the only person that has our data, technology, access to camera footage from the amazing things that Axon does, and you don't have social workers and counselors that are looking for the kids that are crying, that are screaming, that are yelling, that are begging for our help, then I think that we're not doing it right. And so those officers should have access to that data and information from day one. And if you need help with us developing strategies around how to use it or custom dashboards for them, and how to partner and work with schools. If we detect the gunshot, the schools know all the kids who live around there. They should have that as soon as school starts the next day. And if they don't, it's because we're not asking the right questions when new technology comes to us.
Anthony, you want to chime in on that? I know that you have worked with mayors across the city, as I am one, that you're currently working with, about developing these comprehensive and robust strategies. And talk to us about what you think mayors should be thinking about as they develop those and implementing those.
Thank you for that. And I agree 100% with Dr. Tate. So when we ask mayors to think about their comprehensive public safety strategies, it really is thinking about what do you want the future of your city to look like for your children, right? What are we really trying to accomplish, right? We talk about it as violence and crime reduction, but it really is around we want to have safe, healthy, and hopeful communities for all of our children, especially those that are most impacted. So the comprehensive strategies for us is really looking long-term and building a future plan for our young people and their families and the communities that they live in to think about all of the things that we want them to be able to do. So when we ask cities to think about these plans, it really is how do you organize internally, right? All of the departments that we have inside of city government should be focused on this issue. Everybody has a role to play, but also how do those offices partner with community-based folks to build out this comprehensive strategy, right? So the folks who run the offices, I used to run one for Mayor Fisher in Louisville, have to be able to do the inside-outside game, right? So you got to find somebody who's really, really good at organizing and connecting the dots and really helping people cast a vision for what the future looks like. So mayors should be looking for folks who come from that community, who know those communities, who have relationships with those communities, but also who knows how to maneuver inside of politics, because local government is not easy to navigate, right? And then the last thing I will say, Mayor Scott, is that mayors need to lead the way. You got to be really, really clear to all of your departments that this is an important priority, and when the director from that office calls you, I need you to move, because they're moving on my behalf, right? So a lot of times we can get caught up into the red tape because some city folks don't want to move the way we need them to, and they need to hear that directly from the mayors and the mayors' teams that this is priority. Use ShotSpotters, use the CVI and the outreach work, use all of the work that you need to make this happen, but all of us have a role to play. So I think that's the charge that I have for mayors, is to find somebody who can open and run your office, but support them fully with a budget, and then also with your voice.
And Anthony, I just want to just dovetail there for two things. Push you on one thing to get something out, but also on another. Talking about that, the offices that you ran for Mayor Fisher, the one that we have in Baltimore. Talk to me about how important you think that is for that office to literally be an arm of the mayor's office, and what that means and that impact. And for our mayors who are always under the pressure of from the folks that elect us. Talk to us about how the comprehensive strategy doesn't mean that you're not focusing on the immediate things that violence, how it is all one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. First question is that, for us, we believe that it's very important for that office to be an arm of the mayor, because it gives it the weight that it needs to get the work done that it needs to get done. It gives them the convening power that it needs. It gives them the voice that it needs, and it gives them the strength that it needs to really move an agenda, right? Because it's connected to the mayor in that way. Secondly, when we talk about a comprehensive plan, it is about the both and, right? You got to address the immediate issue that we're dealing with community violence, right? That means you got to have a strong community violence intervention and prevention strategy, right? Mayor Scott and other mayors in this room have invested lots of their ARP dollars in their general funds to help build out that ecosystem where they have strong folks who can do the outreach, who can do the community violence intervention, the mediation, and the work, but also are working internally to look at their policies and their budgets and their procedures to say, how do we make this long term? Because you're looking at, one, how do you disrupt the current cycle of violence that we're dealing with, but then also how are we dismantling all of the inequities that create this environment in the first place. And the third thing is then how do we invest in these new models and in this new way, right? So you got to do all of that work at the same time, which is another reason, Mayor, to your point, why it's important for these offices to be connected to the mayor, because the mayor can help move all of that in most cities where we have strong mayor-led cities.
Thank you. And Paul, we're going to come to you now. And can you talk about how your sector can help us fill gaps when it comes to successful youth violence strategies to deal with this issue, both in the short and long term?
I appreciate that, Mayor. Paul John with ShotSpotter. And I've just been in this sector since July, so I'm learning about the potential that our sector has in filling these gaps. And one of the things that I'm sort of realizing and working with my counterpart Gerard here is we have opportunities to work directly with you and to funnel them into public sector safety jobs, public safety sector jobs. So thinking about what it means to work with other companies and work directly with law enforcement and work directly with government agencies to provide youth with internships, paid internships, with jobs, paid jobs, so that they can see how these decisions are being made and have the impact that they want to have on their communities when it comes to saving the lives of the folks that live in these communities and working with them to reduce violence. That is something that I've realized is an opportunity that we can provide for youth and involving them directly in the specific strategies that we can do to reduce gun violence. Paying them well is something that I think can have an enormous impact. A lot of times we find these high school students and college students and young people trying to find ways to get paid that lead them into these cycles of violence that they otherwise could have avoided if they could provide for their families, if they could provide for their brothers and sisters, if they could provide for themselves. So making the investments, the direct investments into young people by saying, listen, we want to bring you into this internship, we want to bring you into this job so that you can help provide for your family, and that's so that you can live your life in a slightly different way, and that's so you can have an impact on this issue that we're so desperately needing to have an impact on.
Thank you. And I think, mayors, we all know how the struggle is with our school systems and many of us not being in direct control of them. So For Marlon and John, talk to us about how school leaders can work with city leaders to craft, deep violence intervention strategies that include our young people.
Thanks for that, Mayor. Am I on? I'm not on. Good now. Am I good now? All right, there we go. Thanks for that, Mayor. The schools definitely need to play our part and get involved. One of the things that's going on at the school level is that a lot of companies are not really at the table to help with our young people. So it's really so many things that are missing at the school level. I work as a school counselor, so outside of that, I realize that because of the lack of programs for our youth, there's a huge window where these students are not being monitored, they're not being supervised. So I started a mentorship in 2009 called Gentlemen of Vision, and we've been able to help over 500 young men get through high school successfully and move up. But we've been able to sit down with mayors and leaders to figure out strategies to keep these young people engaged, because like the gentleman was saying on the end, being able to provide opportunities for them. The opportunities are not there. So you can help them find ways to earn some money, because again, they have dreams, but again, we have to be able to be invited to the table to have those conversations.
John?
John Bush from Savannah, Georgia, Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. I've worked as a violence intervention specialist in the hospitals and the school system for about 7 years prior to taking on this role. And in that experience, I noticed the school system has a real good structure in-house. But when there's a problem that disrupts that structure, the first thing they do is sweep that problem out the door for the city to deal with that problem. Using technology, I see there's many opportunities where we can actually take and reallocate resources to take the problem that the school has discovered and start to deal with this problem before we send it out to the streets, on a minor scale. Just to take a school fight, for instance. 2 kids have an issue in school, you send them home. First thing they do is jump on social media and start beefing up the fight. Kids are in school with their phones, receiving that information. Now you have other disruptions going on in the school that you no longer have control of because you no longer have that kid in school. But by the time they get out of school that evening right there, now you have a drive-by shooting because you didn't deal with the situation at the school system. So knowing that we have the problem and having a solution at hand, we need to start to break down these silos that we operate in. The school system is doing their best as they feel to protect the child. So they don't want to put the information out there to the city police for the child to be arrested and things like that. Meanwhile, your court systems, they're doing their thing to protect the child so that data doesn't go back out into the school system and disrupt his education system. The hospitals are trying to protect data so it doesn't impact the child's social life. Your city government's protecting data. But we break down these silos and find a way to say yes to each other as opposed to every chance we get say no just off a traditional habit. Like, oh, we don't do that. We'll find a way to do it. And some of the technology that I was working with Dr. Tate on developing that we're going to deploy in Savannah, it actually creates a universal case management software. So yes, we do have certain data that we don't need to leak out to certain departments. So it's firewalled for those purposes right there. And then there's certain pieces where if I'm working with a client and I lose contact with the client, later on some other agency has involvement with the client, they're updating that system with the new address. Now I can get back involved with the client. A lot of times what I'm actually seeing is our youth are up to 12 years old. We allow them to participate in programs and camps around the city that we sponsor these things. I mean, almost like, government-sponsored babysitting. But once they turn 12 years old, oh, no, we don't do that anymore. But now we allow the parent who's working 2 and 3 jobs to leave that 12-year-old home unsupervised until the age of 16 when we decide, hey, we want to start putting them on jobs. From 12 to 16 years old, you got a child sitting home unsupervised? What are they going to do? They're going to cluster at that home of least resistance. The neighborhood mom that says, oh, they love me because I take care of them. Their parents don't understand them. Yeah, because you let them sit around and smoke weed and do everything else, and all of a sudden, what was a group of 12-year-olds who knew how to do things in camp under supervised conditions, now they're trying to develop their rap careers and starting to mimic those habits that they see in the rap videos. And now all of a sudden we want to come back, I know us in the state of Georgia, if we have 3 or more people that commit 2 or more crimes and we have a name, that's a gang. So by the time they turn 16, we turn around and certify them as a gang. They didn't decide to be a gang. They didn't want to be a gang. They just wanted to be a bunch of kids that hung out for each other. They became a family. And because we weren't there being involved in the family, because we weren't actually participating or allowing them to participate, as the old African proverb says, if you don't let the kids come and get warm by the fire, they'll burn down the city trying to stay warm. They're trying to create their own fires. They're trying to create their own sources of income. And we have to get these silos torn down so that we're actually working collectively, so we don't have them doing their own thing, that we're working with those kids.
John, just a quick follow-up. A quick follow-up there. I know from experience, talk about the importance of us trying to build systems and work through systems, because we know, as you said, often we actually had this yesterday with some young people, community issues come into the school and vice versa, because the schools are part of the community. But when we're talking about young people, and one of the biggest hurdles often is data sharing, right? We're talking about, with Anthony and others, about building violence intervention work in our schools, right? But not being able to connect them to the things that we have out. Talk about the importance, and anybody really, I know Dr. Tate, you wanted to chime in about how we have to rebuild these systems or build anew so that we can actually have the impact, because it doesn't matter if the principal knows what's going on if she can't tell the CVI workers in the community what's going on. Talk about the importance of us building those systems and changing these systems so that we can have the desired impact.
Well, I mean, our most intelligence-based organization in the city is always your law enforcement. They're out there in the streets, they're collecting data, they're doing all these things that are necessary to be able to actually seal down a case and present it in front of the district attorney's office. Well, what we're instituting right now with our assistant chief, Gunther, is we're now taking intel and using it to solve the problem, so we don't have to solve cases. We already know Pookie and JoJo got problems. So take that information, give it to me and my interrupters, so we can come and knock on Pookie and JoJo's house and say, let's solve the problem. So they don't end up shooting each other and you have to deploy assets in the middle of the night to go out there and save somebody's life or go and lock somebody else up for actually taking a life.
Dr. Tate?
Yep. And if I may add, sometimes this seems like a huge problem to address, right? Before Mr. Bush was in his position, I was in Savannah in a similar position, and I was in DC government for a few years. I can go to Mr. Warden, who trained me to work in schools as a social worker many years ago, and say, give me the top 20 students that you know are involved in crime and violence. You've been told, you've been working with them, and we want to enroll them in these programs and services that the city already has available. He will give me those names. I will go meet with them. We can get them enrolled in services and supports. The problem I keep saying is, mayors, you will invest in these programs. You will put the money out to the CBOs. And the students who enroll in those programs and services is not the kids out there getting shot and shooting. That's right. So you need to write into it that are they justice involved? Were they a recent victim of a crime? How do you ensure that the ones who are very low risk are not the ones taking all the slots? And when the shootings happen, they're aiming at people. These aren't computers shooting. 30 seconds. If I told you out of that door right there, there was a 60% chance after school there was going to be a shooting, nobody would let the kids walk out that door. My technology will tell you and analyze for you the blocks where the shooting's going to happen, the times, the days of the week it's going to happen. And we let the kids who we know at the highest risk walk right out that door, right into the gunfire. Every day. And what do we do about it? We know who the kids are. We know the neighborhoods. We know the blocks. And they leave right out of your school every day. What are we going to do after this?
Thank you for that, Doctor, and I'll come back to you in a second. Regina and Rick, talk to us about the Share the Table program at Exxon, how it brings together relevant public safety stakeholders.
Ian Leslie here with Axon, and I think a key word that everybody has touched on is proximity. And proximity is exactly what we accomplish with our Share the Table. So our Share the Table is a community education program where we bring together those stakeholders, we bring together those community leaders, elected officials, mayors, as well as our customers on the law enforcement safety side to talk about the technologies and demystify the technologies that are being used in these communities on a disproportional rate. So not only engaging people in these dialogues about how they want these technologies used, but allowing them to have the education the same way that the police chief or the mayor that would get, breaking down this education that way that they can educate for themselves on the policies and the technologies that they want used in their communities.
Chan, you want to add?
My mic is on. Can you all hear me? I think Ian did a great job about that, and just leaning into these technology, it's just a tool. So we also like to make sure we're incorporating conversations around training as well, around Share the Table, and how community members best see fit that it should be implemented in their communities as well. So we do, like you said, talk a lot about policies and recommendations. And I know we're probably all kind of burnt out from having events all the time in our communities around policing. We do offer an after-action report when the event is over to communities because they're the experts in this issue to best move forward on next steps on what was discussed at these events.
And then, Shane, I'll stay, if you could talk about that with you guys' experiences, what role companies and technology can play to help public safety in communities and how we can use those relationships to make this, especially the technology use, more equitable.
Yeah, so, we're talking a lot about gun violence and officer-involved shootings, and mayors and leaders, we have a huge task at hand on how to unpack this. From a technology standpoint, at Axon, we're looking at creating better and more effective tools for our officers so that they have other options when interacting with youth and members of our community and public. So, it looks like creating more effective tools to decrease officer-involved shootings. We're also looking at better ways to use data to look at use of force and how to unpack that for our communities and create better solutions around that. We're also looking at training. Oftentimes when we're looking at officer-involved shootings, body-worn camera footage, there's a lot of issues and breakdown with training. And I'm sure you guys, when you're talking to your public safety agencies, training at times isn't always accessible or as easily accessible as we would like it, especially around tasers. So we are using VR technology to provide more access to training and even empathy training as well on how to use more effective tools and efficient tools. But we also know that when we're thinking about de-escalation, we don't want to just start with a tool like a taser. We want to talk about other pathways with building relationships with community members around de-escalation and having conversations. And I also say, too, I talk about this off our team, is that as we're looking at better tools and better data and technology to address these solutions or these issues with public safety agencies, we also know that we can't police our way out of these issues. So we do need to think further about how we're better investing in communities, looking at shootings, whether they're officer-involved shootings or community shootings, as a public health crisis. The way when you look at, you talked about the maps, they're happening in communities where there's high poverty, where there's lack of resources, lack of support. So we know it's systemic. And I think even as technology companies, we are working to build coalitions at Axon with community members and with community leaders, elected officials, to have deeper conversations about what does reimagining public safety look like for our cities, who needs to be at the table, what industries need to be at the table, whether that's especially mental health, healthcare, education. We have educators here on this panel. I used to be an educator. And just go a little bit deeper in bringing the conversation forward and not just leaning just solely on policing, but how do we create better solutions that are more holistic.
Anthony, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, and I do, because been having conversations with Gerard and Paul really around technology, right? And I just think we got to be real clear that the communities that we're talking about have distrust in government and in technology, because they both have been harmful to our communities, right? So as we have these conversations and as we talk about how we move and how we create these new public safety strategies, we got to be real clear that we're dealing with centuries of racism and systemic stuff that we got to break through. And I appreciate the conversations that we're having with ShotSpotters and others, because they're recognizing how the tools have been used before and are trying to say, how do we better use stuff, right? So I think we just got to have those kind of conversations, because community members are asking for a new model, right? And it's not, they don't want to start with policing, they want to start with affordable and safe housing. They want to start with access to jobs that pay a livable wage. They want to start with a quality education. As Dr. Tate said, you can even know which schools most of our young people who get shot are coming from. And that's been for decades, right? None of this data is new. Community members had this data a long time ago and have been saying we need investment in these communities, right? But we have not listened, right? So when we talk about all of these things and we talk about, and it takes all of us to have this conversation, from the school systems to the mayors to council members, which is, we need a whole Black council member association, Phyllis. I don't know where you're at, but somebody's got to start pulling council members together, because we got to be having a full conversation, so when you present budgets to council members, they get passed in a way that helps us move an agenda, right? So how do we have all of these conversations? So I just want to just add to this, as we talk about technology, we talk about government, and we talk about police, and we always try to separate police from city government, which they're not. They're a part of city government, and we got to have this honest conversation that there's some barriers to move all of this, because we're not honest about the past. And we got to get honest about the past and start addressing that, because I don't think we get to true public safety until we start talking about justice and freedom and liberation for the communities and the people that we're talking about. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation, Mayor.
Well, thank you.
Again, technology is important, but to what degree do we bring it in, and how do we bring it into the conversation? And I appreciate Dr. Tate about talking about community members need to have the same access to technology as police do, so that they can be a part of this conversation in a real way.
Paul, you wanted to jump in?
You just took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally about
You
to
approved
say
this
that.
message.
And I rose my hand, and then you decided, no, I'm just playing. I think the tech that we have between Axon, between ShotSpotter, and all of the other techs that are used to solve crimes, to reduce violence, they do have the potential to be misused, specifically by the folks, our clients and the people who buy them. And it's up to us to make sure that those best practices are in place, and that we as companies hold our clients accountable for using them the way that they should be used. We've gotten a lot of pushback about surveillance technology, a lot of pushback about being in Black and brown communities. And the reason that we're in Black and brown communities is because that's where our tech is needed most, right? That's where the tech is needed most, and that's exactly where we should be. However, that's also where communities are being over-policed. That's also where we have rampant racism, where we have rampant underinvestment. So being able to use the platforms that we have as companies, as elected officials, to overinvest in those specific places, we're telling you exactly where shots are being fired. So we're also telling you exactly where resources should be sent so that we can prevent shots from being fired. And that's where I think our companies can also help fill the gaps, is being able to use the data with organizations as well to send violence interrupters, to send mental health resources, to cure blight, to send economic resources, to put jobs where companies should be investing in, to make sure that we're building these communities as well. Far too many times we use that data to tell people where not to go. This is the data that shows you where you should be going, where you should be investing, and where you should be working with your community.
No, thank you for that, Paul. And this actually leads to me a question for the mayors, and just by show of hands, mayors in the audience, how many have ShotSpotter? how many have used ShotSpotter to deploy anything other than police? I think that's the conversation that we have to have. I know we've had that with you guys, but I think it's important because when you're talking about, and it is where we need to go. I know for me, and I don't know if you guys have this data, it would be great to have it nationwide from the cities that you're in. I know that 80% of my ShotSpotters don't have a corresponding 911. So for me, it's actually, in reality, a lot less about police response than it is fire EMS, basic life-saving support. And I think with the now working with Monsi and working with Anthony and others to deploy our violence interrupters, to deploy trauma folks to those neighborhoods, because sometimes there are no one shot, but we know that someone will be if we don't get there in a quicker fashion. And I think it leads me to a question that I have for the entire panel about the use of technology, and as we've been talking about, using it in a way that doesn't depict our neighborhoods as places where this is just rampant, but really where it depicts places where folks are calling out for help in many ways, because that's what we have. Talk to our mayors about where they should start if they're trying to use these pieces of technology to rebuild trust, to handle these issues in a comprehensive fashion. Where, on the expert panel that we have here, where do you suggest that they start? Anybody? Shane?
Yeah, I could briefly touch on this. So, of course, we keep talking about proximity. We have to build systems where we are incorporating community into all of this work. I think we've talked about that. I know at our company, we have a community advisory coalition that exists, and they have power within our organization. We also have an AI ethics board that serves to make sure that we're incorporating responsible AI with all of our technology. Oftentimes what happens is that the communities that are most impacted by our decisions and by whether it's our technology, our policy, are often left out of the development process or the design process. And so I think we have to start with making sure that, and we've talked about this, that community is at the center of all that we're doing, and that they have power. It's not just, a powwow that we have, once or twice a year, but we're incorporating them into all of our legislative, as a tech company, it's our design processes and our work, and advising from them. The experts are those who are the ones that have the lived experiences that we're trying to address. So even with our coalition, these are grassroots leaders and organizations that are serving or part of justice-impacted communities. And I think it's a humbling process that takes place. One of the principles of justice to design is, despite the intent of the designer, or it could be the leader or a legislator, if it's not reducing harm in the community, or if it's not impactful for community, then we failed. And so at the beginning of any solution that we're trying to address, we have to incorporate voices, community voices in that work. And they have to be the center of that work. And when I say community, I'm talking about those who are at the center of the lived experiences and trauma that we're trying to address. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think for me, Mayor, you start with those who pulled the trigger. One of the things me and Mayor Fisher used to do on a monthly basis is go into the jails and have a conversation with those who were in there for the most violent crime, and ask them, what would it have taken to keep you out, and what do you need when you're ready to go back out? I think you start with the families who are grieving a loved one that they lost, right? You start with those folks, but I also think you start with those who have been shot and survived, because those are the folks who understand this way more than any of us do, and you have a conversation with them around the technology that we're thinking about bringing into the city, around how do we deploy that, right? Because we start this conversation with law enforcement most of the time. We start this conversation internally with our teams, but I think to truly center folks and get to the solutions that we're all trying to get to, you start with those who are directly impacted by this issue in a way that centers them in the conversation and have the conversation with them around how we move. Because I also think that's data points, that's technology that we can use that's different than just what we're talking about here. So I think that's where I would start. And I think you start with that and spend time with those folks so that they understand, one, what these two forms of technology are, what they can do, and how we can use them collectively to bring healing and peace in our communities. And it's not about we want to send as many police officers as we can. I think Paul's right on. This is about us trying to connect information to say, what resources are we lacking and how do we invest in those, right? So I would start there with those three primary groups.
So if you're trying to cure cancer, you go to cancer patients, not people that have high blood pressure. Right?
There you go.
Yes, sir.
And Mayor, if I can add, we had a lot of recent experience with this right now. If somebody had COVID, you start with them. And then you go to the people that's in their home, the people that they've been exposed to. There is a public health approach to violence prevention. It's already out there. Like, it's there already. So do that. Most of the mayors, first step you planning for the summer right now. And Mayor Lightfoot, my hometown, I'm from the south side of Chicago. Thank you for all that you do. Yes. Yeah.
Get ready.
And so when we give you data and hotspots and you put your first dollar towards the summer crime initiative, if it's not in those hotspots, with the kids who live in those neighborhoods and with those families, and you measure, you're getting the data about where they live. Look at the data. We ain't getting enough kids from those hotspots, from those families. Whoever just got shot, who recently just got shot, they automatically enrolled. They little brothers, they cousins, they whole family. And if we run out of space and low-risk people can't get in, go to regular summer camp. Right? So use that data to put it directly where the money that you're spending to reduce crime. Your visitors will be safer. The kids who low risk will be safer going to and from. You'll get and do all the things they said. Bring those people in and design the programs that are directly for them. But I will tell you without getting too emotional, Mr. Bush taught me how to be a hospital-based violence intervention worker, and I had a doctorate degree. We sat in hospitals as the kids came in bleeding out. He knew 90% of them since they were 7 or 8 years old. We've been knowing since they were 7 or 8 they was high risk. And what did we do? We watched them come in and get shot over and over. As I'm going to them by their bedside, telling them about services and supports I know ain't ready for them when they get out. Focus on them. And then call us. We're available. If you need our help on how to use our technology in these ways, I'm begging you. I run all our community impact and engagement stuff at ShotSpotter. Paul and I, we the people. If you want to know how to use ShotSpotter for it, call us. That's my ask to you.
And last but not least,
to add on to what Dr. Tate's bring it back even further before the prison, we've been doing this exact same thing for decades already. You're taking third grade reading scores and determining how many prison cells you need to fill. This is the next generation of technology that we're talking about. Let's start taking this technology that we have right here, and once we get that kid in there to where we're seeing he has poor attendance in school, we see he has poor grade performance, and we see he has discipline action. That kid right there has already told you that you're going to be seeing him in a hospital room. That's the reason I encounter those kids, because I go to those schools, and I have the principal bring me his top 20. And we go to a room and we sit down, we powwow, we talk, we build a relationship. So when they show up in that hospital room, the reason I'm able to deal with them is because they already knew me. And if they didn't know me, it's because they were in that mild to moderate risk. The high risk that I was dealing with are the ones that actually sent them there. But if we had dealt with those high-risk individuals, that mild to moderate risk wouldn't be laid up in a hospital bed, and we wouldn't be locking up that high-risk individual. We could have concentrated on that 20 and solved both of their problems. But we let the 20 go back home, out the doors, because we have what my current district attorney, Shalana Jones, says. The problem is our gangs are more united than our government. We are taking money and building school systems, shut them down at 3 o'clock, and then have to build a multi-million-dollar building for a recreation center next door to them. Right. We already have a building right there. The kids are already right there. Let that staff go home and let the next staff come in. Instead of spending $1 million on that other building, spend $1 million on a new staff. Keep the kids where we know they're safe at. Work together collectively. We got to stop all the foolishness that's controlling power as opposed to saving lives. That's the only reason I got into this game was I wanted to save lives. I was an insurance investor. All I wanted to do was make my money and go chill out on the beach. But when I looked around and saw all these little brothers, I grew up with my daddy in my household. My parents are still together right now, about to celebrate 50 years this August. That was not my lifestyle. But I couldn't stand around and see my brothers and sisters laid out here on hospital beds over and over again and not do something about it. So I got drugged from one ministry into the district attorney's office. Now I'm over in the mayor's office to do one thing, just save lives. I wouldn't even been over here if ShotSpotter hadn't stole Dr. Tate. When that man came to God, I saw God walk through the door when he came to town. Like, that man got the answers. I took time off from doing the work I was doing to piggyback with him and take him around town. Let's get this done. They took him and put him on another level. Now he's available to help all these cities out. But he still comes back and helps me out because that's my brother now. I mean, we family. We got the same heart, the same mind. And I ride with him all the way on whatever he's got going on. But this technology right here is changing the game from what I'm doing in my city.
Thank you. Let's everybody give our panel, a wonderful panel, a round of applause. And we would love to always have you continue this conversation. If you haven't, you can turn to page 34 of your pamphlet. You can join Anthony and Cities United as we have the Cities United Conference in Baltimore this year, April 26th through the 20th. August. Is August? October, yeah.
You got me messed up.
Man. October.
Man, to mess me up.
October 26th to 28th this year, and we would love to have you there continue to talk about how we can build public safety in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.